All right, hello, Andrews. This is a head trip being here. This is feeling very Net 9080. This podium here. You guys remember that from Net 98? Never thought the day would come. It's really great to see all you students, faculty, staff, friends, alumni, and it's great to be all together. And it is, wow, I'm getting used to these lights. It is wonderful to see so many people here. I finished in 2006, and I can tell you we had about half of this group here tonight for Vespers. So this afternoon, I was like plastering people's Facebook walls, asking them to come, and it really looks like everyone turned up. All 16 of my friends. Thank you very much for being here. What I want to talk about tonight is not necessarily what you often talk about at alumni homecomings. It often gets nostalgic. You talk about how things used to be, the old Andrews. What I want to talk about is more the future, what we can head to. And I want to tell you a little bit about my story and where I'm coming from in doing so. You see, in November 2012, my wife Jamie and I decided to make a decision that would completely change our lives. We decided that 2013 would be unlike any year we had ever experienced. Now, we decided that we were trading office work in California for frontline missions work in 4 different countries across 3 different continents. We were trading boardroom meetings for coffee shop mission strategy sessions, quite literally. We were trading Californian bumper-to-bumper commutes to work for Thai-style tuk-tuk rides through the streets of Bangkok. We were trading rushed microwave dinners for $1 dulce de leche alfajores, Argentine style. I know I got some Argentines. See one right there. We were trading our lives in the relentless rat race for tram rides across the buzzing European capital that is Berlin, which is where we are right now. We were trading our lives in the safe suburban comfort zone for the unknown. Yes, we quit our jobs. Yes, we took that leap that, like so many that have a compelling dream, we had been thinking about for years. And yes, all we can now afford to eat is stale bread and weak herbal tea. Actually, that part's a lie. We're feasting on ramen noodles nightly. God has been very good. He's seen to our every need and then some. What I want to talk to you about tonight is a completely fresh take on the idea of missions. Missions is our focus. And do me a favor and drop any of the old, sort of tired ideas that keep getting recycled about what missionary work should look like. Drop the idea of mission work as the calling of the few. Drop the idea of the mission field being a place, or only a place like, say, Papua New Guinea or Borneo or somewhere. It's time to redefine missions. And as we do so, I want to tell you about a year that both Jamie and I absolutely know has been the best that we have ever experienced. Now, I'm going to take this in 3 parts. Number 1, do not put off your life for retirement. Now, that might not be as much a reality for students right now, but alumni, you know what I'm talking about. This feeling of, yeah, I'll get to it, you know? Trust me, it's easy, students, to get sucked into the rat race as soon as you leave school. Number 2, mission work is everybody's job. And finally, number 3, a look ahead, urban missions and the future. I'm going to get started with number 1, do not put off living for retirement. I'm going to read you something. It's from The Onion. Anybody read The Onion here? It's sort of the fake news site, tongue-in-cheek. It's deliberately satirical. I'm just putting that out there. But it's a website and also a print piece. And it's talking about the human desire to follow your life's passion, to follow what you dream about, the big dream. But it also highlights our tendency as humans to get distracted from that ultimate dream of yours and get sucked up into the unimportant, the distractions of life. I'm going to ask you to, as I read this piece, and it's short, please look at it through the lenses of faith, okay? Whenever he talks about your life passion or your dream, also add to that God's calling, your life's calling in life. All right, here we go. The title is, Find the Thing You're Most Passionate About, Then Do It, on nights and weekends for the rest of your life. Here it goes. I have always been a big proponent of following your heart and doing exactly what you want to do. It sounds so simple, right? But there are people who spend years, even decades, trying to find a true sense of purpose for themselves. My advice? Just find a thing you enjoy doing more than anything else, your one true passion, and do it for the rest of your life. On nights and weekends, when you're exhausted and cranky and just want to go to bed. It could be anything. Music, writing, drawing, acting, teaching. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is that once you've decided what you want to do, you dive in a full 10% and spend the other 90 torturing yourself because you know so well that it's too late to dramatically change gears in life. And you are stuck on this mind-numbing path for the rest of your life. Is there any other way to live? You don't want to wake up in 10 years and think to yourself, what if I'd just gone for my dreams in those brief 30-minute breaks at work when I was younger? Because even if it doesn't work out, don't you owe it to yourself to look yourself in the mirror and confidently say, you know what? I gave it my best half-hearted shot. All right, so the article is longer, but I think I can cut it off here. You get what I'm saying. God has placed dreams in our hearts, big goals, things that you really have to stretch to get to. He's asked us to do His work here on earth. Now, are we living our lives so that we give God the best of our time, the best of our years, the best part of the day even, really tangibly? Or does it become later on in life when I have the money, later on in life when the kids are out of the house, or when I have the kids, or whatever it is? Does it become the last 10 minutes of the day when we guiltily think about what we should be doing? Are we losing our identity as God followers? Are we being intentional about giving Him everything we have, fully following His calling for our lives? Or are we giving Him the tired leftovers? Matthew 6, verse 33. This is a super common verse in the Bible. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Now, let me tell you our story and why texts like Matthew 6, verse 33, and articles like The Onion really resonate with me and Jamie. You see, years before Jamie and I decided to take the leap and leave our jobs to travel the world and do urban missionary projects, we had been thinking about this. We had been dreaming about this, wanting to do it. I came from a missionary family, and while at Andrews, I grew in my faith. I was affirmed in this vision to go change the world, to serve internationally. Now, when I graduated from Andrews, I had a great job lined up for me in Los Angeles. So I was all excited, senior has a job, and it was really good for me because I was Swedish and I really needed a job or I'd be booted from the US. And so it couldn't have been better. I was making decent money. I was feeling really comfortable. I was carving out a nice social scene in LA. It was totally my city. I felt like LA was me. But soon that initial elation passed. The feeling of, leaving college, leaving Bjorn and going to LA, that was exciting, but that passed. I started getting bored. I felt like, what am I doing with this overly comfortable life in California? This wasn't the dynamic, service-driven, international direction that I wanted to head when I was in college. I knew I could not keep this up forever. Before I even met Jamie, my wife, I told myself in my head, there is no way I'm going to marry a girl if all she wants to do is stay in LA. No way. I wanted to get back to those missionary roots and serve internationally. Well, imagine my shock when I started dating Jamie. It was really nice. It was like birds chirping, moonlight dancing, all the kind of like warm, fuzzy feelings of starting to date a wonderful person. And then she said, with bliss in her heart, I could live in LA my whole life. I felt like I was going to die. But luckily, after time together and kind of sharing dreams, mutually talking about the future, she came around and she said, I could do this. And we decided that international mission was in our future. But here was the problem. We were itching to do this, but we just could not work up the courage to take the leap. We had stable jobs, growing situations at work, and we just couldn't do it. We had been dreaming, putting money aside even, planning, but nothing happened. Years passed. Some of our enthusiasm started to die because so much time was passing. And then some more died. And at some point, I started thinking, are we ever going to do this? Is this going to happen? Or is this just going to be something we talk about later that we wanted to do in life? And then I found myself on the receiving end of an intervention. Now, interventions are never fun for anyone, but especially not for the guy that's getting, it's directed to. It was a cold, cold night in San Francisco. And I was actually in town. I'd driven in from the country where I lived, and I was saying goodbye to a friend who was moving to New York City, also actually an Andrews grad. And he had a serious look on his face. I remember he looked at me, and by the way, this is one of these friends that hits you straight, like no dressing it up, like really like this, you're gonna hear this kind of thing. And he told me, Bjorn, I gotta say this, you're not gonna like it, but you have to take it in the right way. I was already like bracing myself for what is this? What is he gonna tell me? And then he hit me. He said, what are you doing with your life? You're playing it too safe. I've been listening to you rationalize your comfortable California lifestyle for so long, and I know this is not what you're supposed to be doing with your life. You're better than this. Take some risks, for goodness sake. And then he hit me. You are wasting your life. It was a lot to swallow. It was really humbling. The words seemed to come out of nowhere, and I remember they just kind of hung in the air for me. And then I excused myself. I actually went to a bathroom at the place we were in, went to a stall and locked the door. I had to be alone to think. I had to process what I just heard. Now, the problem was that my friend was right. I had almost completely lost the spark and the idealism that I'd had as a student at Andrews. And trust me, I'm an enthusiastic guy. I was really, really on fire at Andrews. While I was here, I mentored kids in Benton Harbor. I'd done a student missionary year. That's why I was the only guy standing for some reason. And I dreamt of changing the world for the better. Seek knowledge, affirm faith, change the world. I mean, I was sold on being an Andrews student and standing for what Andrews stood for. I mean, I ate Sam's chicken, for goodness sake. I was Andrews. But somehow, finances, community standing, an obsession with the politics of work and kind of navigating that replaced the ideas and the ideals that made me tick, that really made me excited about life. Somewhere along the line, I had gradually and subconsciously decided that part of the deal after leaving Andrews, after leaving college, was accepting the drudgery of 9 to 5, protecting yourself with cynicism whenever anyone tried to do anything a little different, a little idealistic with their lives. I had learned to do whatever it took to live in comfort and security. Where had my dreams gone? Where was that younger version of me, the Andrews student that really wanted to make a difference? Where was the missionary kid now? The former me that believed in divine destiny, a higher calling, international impact. An ugly thought crossed my mind. What would happen if I stayed on this track for the next 20 to 30 years. The mental image that I conjured up there in the bathroom stall was horrific to me. Now, there would be money. We were already doing okay financially, where we're comfortably situated in our financial lives, and it was only looking to get better. But what would happen if I continued to substitute comfort for calling? Material indicators of success for God's mission for my life. What would happen if I continued to chase prestige over passion for what God wanted to do in our lives? How would my life look if I continued to chase, and instead of pursuing a life of service, I just went for the endless sugar high of endless house and car upgrades? It was already starting. You know, my friends in our 30s, we were already starting to live that life, looking to live more of it. I remembered some advice that a mentor gave me, and he sensed that I was starting to get off track after college. And he said, "Bjorn, do not lose your vision in life." I did that. He said, I started chasing the dollar. I started getting the mortgages. I chased practicalities, and I lost what I was about. He said, if you do that, Bjorn, you're going to know when you're my age that you have sold out. And he said, that's a very, very sad place to be. As I stood in that San Francisco bathroom stall, I decided that this was it. I'd flipped the switch. I had put off God's calling long enough. It was time to step out in faith. A few days later, my faith actually translated to a conversation with my wife, and I went up to her. It was lunchtime at her job. She was an editor at the local newspaper. And I'd often go over and have lunch with her. And so we were standing by her car, and I can still picture this parking lot conversation. And I said, Jamie, I've got something to say, and it's a little awkward and dramatic, so I'm just gonna say it. We need to do this. We've put our dreams on hold for way too long. We need to quit our jobs. We need to go and do this travel around the world, and we need to do these service projects that we've just been talking about. We need to just go do this. You can imagine how dramatic that was. I mean, just out of nowhere, like on your lunch break. But I'll never forget how she reacted. She said, I'm in. Let's do it. Within weeks of that conversation, we had put years of mere talk into action. We've done a lot of talking about this. We quit our jobs. We sold or gave away most of our stuff. We announced our plans on Culture-Mutt, the blog, and we created our mission itinerary for 2013. Bangkok, Buenos Aires, Berlin, and Bombay, 3 months each. We were doing this. Now, needless to say, our lives have been entirely different after we made that decision. And we both say that we have never been happier. That's not just some cheesy line that I'm trying to come up with. That is the absolute truth. I was recently talking to a mentor on Skype, and he's a completely secular lawyer of Jewish descent in California, who was a mentor of mine back in the day when I was working at my last job. And he told me, my wife and I really admire you guys for what you're doing, and that you had the foresight to do it now and not later on when you might not have the energy. I thought it was kind of funny, because he actually thought we were on vacation all year. And it's like, this kind of funny. Art was his name. And I appreciated the kind words, and I kind of put them in the context of what we really were doing, which was, for us, a modern missionary year. And, I thought this was not due to any particularly smart thinking on our part. If anything, we were delaying this. This had everything to do with the still, small voice, with God's calling for our lives. It had everything to do with His patience in our slowness to take up the call. To realize that mission is everybody's business. Moving on to point number 2, just that. Mission should involve everybody. It's not just the call of the people that we hear about in the old school mission stories or the people in Borneo, Bible workers. Mission work does not necessarily even equate to church employment. It does not need to be through traditional channels. God can use you. God can use me. Students, it may be time for that SM year. Alumni, it may be time for something a lot bolder in life. God will reward you. You don't have to be a professionally trained evangelist to be a missionary. You don't even have to call yourself a missionary to be a missionary. We don't actually talk of ourselves as missionaries when we're doing our work. As I said at the start, it's time to rethink missions. Isaiah 6 verse 8 reads, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here am I, send me.'" This should be our collective and our individual response, saying to God, "Here am I, send me." You may feel like Moses, like you're not up to the task of leading a great change. Like you may feel unqualified, too young, too old. The saying that you're always too young until you're too old definitely applies to something like missions. It's easy to put it off. But you know what? God is not limited by your life situation. He's not limited by your personal insecurities. You may have made major mistakes in life. Most of us have. Wasted energy, misdirected years, broken relationships, living a life of distraction without that focus that is so essential for a happy life. It's easy to get depressed and think about the things that have come and gone, the opportunities that you wish you would have taken. It's easy to say, "It's too late for me. It's too late to make an impact." But nothing could be further from the truth. God is calling us just like he called Moses. He's calling us just like he called the Bible's imperfect heroes like David. He's calling us, not just theology majors or seminarians. That's not a knock, guys. He is calling you. He is calling me. He wants us to do his work. If we're just creative and able and bold, he will empower us to do his work the way he needs us to do it. If you had told me a couple years ago that I would be doing the following: feeding orphans in Bangkok, visiting refugees at an immigration detention center in Bangkok, serving the homeless soup in Buenos Aires, sorting shoes, dusty old shoes in a really dusty basement in Berlin for the homeless as well. That was not my favorite project, just a side note. Or working with churches to build their young adults groups. I mean, I honestly would have had a very big doubting Thomas moment. That did not sound like me. But you know what? It happened. And I want to encourage you, be bold. The point is not your skill level. When I was feeding those kids, more food ended up on their bibs than in their mouths. But the point is, God can work with us. God can work with us, our skill level, and he can work his transforming work in us and through us if we're just willing to take up the call. You know, I mentioned before that I was a missionary kid growing up. My parents were missionaries in Africa before I was born, and 6 months after I was born, we moved to Asia, where I spent the first 12 years of my life. And because I'd grown up like this is part of why I was itching to get back to that kind of life. Now, I went to high school in England, and after you finish at 16 there, and right after I finished, I said, I am going to go and be a student missionary. Now, I joined a group called the 1000 Missionary Movement. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. But what they do is they train 1,000 missionaries a year, or the goal is to train 1,000 missionaries a year and send them out to start churches. Now, I remember it was very, very intense. They would wake us up at 4:30 in the morning. I mean, this was mission training Asia style. And it was to pray. It wasn't like to pray for more sleep. It was to pray for your mission for the day. Then they would take us jogging in the dark, like twist ankles, whatever. You're gonna jog in the dark, chanting these like military, like 1, 2, 3, 4, all this stuff. And it was a total change for me. And then, as if that wasn't enough, still, the sun was rising. We're doing taekwondo and formation, still for physical exercise for our missionary training. Now, my favorite part was this chant that they had at the 1000 Missionary Movement. And I kind of want to teach you guys how this goes. It said, basically, the leader says, I am a missionary. And then the group says, I'm a missionary. The Lord calls me. The Lord calls me. I can do it. I can do it. And then the leader says, once a missionary, and the group goes, always a missionary. So I thought we'd try this tonight, just so it doesn't just stay in our heads and gets too Vespers-y. So let's try it, okay? So, 1, 2, 3, here we go. I'm a missionary. I like it. The Lord calls me. I can do it. Once a missionary. Hey, I think we got some sign-ups for those SM sheets. Amen. The gospel isn't addressed to the select few, guys. Every last one of us is called. It's not about how qualified you are or how ready you feel. It's not about the most gifted or the most talented. It's about you and me. It says, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel. Let's round this up. Let me tell you why we picked cities for what we're doing this year. You see, I really firmly believe that more than any other time in Earth's history, cities are where it's at for evangelism. Let me give you some stats. Over 50% of the world population today lives in cities. Close to 180,000 people each day around the world move to cities, and that equals 60 million every year that are moving to cities. It's growing rapidly. By 2050, 70% of the world's population will live in cities. So really, the urban agenda is key. These numbers really make the point. One of the leading trend monitors online that I try to follow as much as possible, it's called trendwatching.com, puts it this way: urban culture is the culture. Now, we may not like to hear this, but honestly, it's the truth. Urban trends become global trends. There's a reason that, say, fashion brands test places in places like Berlin or Bangkok or New York City. For better or for worse, urban centers are setting the global agenda. Where am I going with this? Well, here's where. If we are to be truly effective in fulfilling the gospel commission, we need to focus our energies not just on the easier kind of areas or not just on far-off jungles, but on the urban jungles right here in the U.S. and in major cities across the world. Figuring out how to communicate authentically and effectively in an urban setting needs to be our priority. If we can learn how to do this well, then our future success in mission strategy will be exponentially greater. Because if we understand cities, we understand how to share good news with the rest of the world. We understand what it's going to look like in the future. We understand the future of evangelism if we understand how to have these conversations in our cities. Now is not the time to retreat as Christian Seventh-day Adventists into our institutions. Now is not the time to play it safe and only associate with people that think and believe the way we do. Now is not the time to behave in this kind of reclusive behavior. We will have to run for the hills at some point, but now is not that time. Now is not the time for the disease of exclusivity that so easily creeps into our institutions. Now is not the time to keep the good news to ourselves. We may call ourselves the remnant, but that does not mean that we live smug, I know more than you know lives. The good news is out there to be shared. Now is the time to do as Paul and take the good news to the cities. To live in Rome and speak to the Romans, to live in Bangkok and speak to the Bangkokians, to live in Berlin and speak to the Berliners. Leave the Adventist fortress. That might be good news to you students, but we all need to be reminded of this. The hymn goes, "A mighty fortress is our God." Not a mighty fortress is our faith community, or a mighty fortress is Andrews University or Loma Linda, where a lot of us are going next. God's vision was never for us to cling stiffly to some exclusive remnant message ensconced in the ivory towers of our institutions. As we step out of our comfort zone, we can see that outside our institutions, often, and this is sad, our churches are floundering. The churches we work in these urban centers have hardly any young adults. I mean, this is almost all young adults. You go outside Andrews University, Loma Linda, PUC, nobody's there. It's very, very sad. I'm not saying that mission elsewhere is not important, but I'm saying it needs to start with cities. We need to focus on these cities. An urban mission strategy translates to a global mission strategy, and what we're doing right now simply is not good enough. Don't underestimate what God can do through you. God can do amazing things, and He's about to do amazing things in our cities. God does incredible things in our lives when we dare to do what is right, to do what is slightly uncomfortable, a little different from what we've done in the past. When we dare to be uncomfortable, God can do really interesting things. When we dare to defy the status quo, let's get old school. When we dare to be a Daniel, right? Biblical and world history is full of examples of people that have stood up and gone against the status quo, that have answered to a higher sense of identity, a higher calling, that have stood for what is right. From a patriarch that led his people through foaming walls in a Red Sea, to a young man, Joshua, heartened by the words, "Be strong and of good courage." From Stephen, the first martyr, to Paul and Peter and countless other people that were killed as early Christians just because of what they believed and for their willingness to stand for what they believe. From a small band of believers that were willing to dig deeper after a great disappointment, to a young teenage girl that saw visions and dreams, both literal and otherwise. From a bridge in Selma and a stubborn woman on a bus, to a preacher man from Atlanta with a dream that continues to turn the tide on centuries of hate and oppression. It takes standing for what is right. These leaders wholeheartedly and passionately refused and rejected the status quo of their day. These were all leaders who answered to a higher calling that had a higher sense of identity and changed their world. Andrew's students, friends, alumni, God has the highest calling for our lives. He is calling us to a higher sense of identity. We need to see ourselves in a different place. He's calling us to be His representatives. Let's use the word missionaries in the world today. Let us not wait for a better time. Let's not wait for someone else to pick up the slack. God says, "Go ye into all the world." That means He is calling us. That means the time is now. Let's all stand and do that missionary chant once again, because we need to get this deep inside ourselves. Stand up, please, and let's do this. All right, say it like you mean it. I'm a missionary. The Lord calls me. I can do it. Once a missionary, always a missionary. Amen. Amen. Let's bow our heads. Father, Andrews University is being called, and we stand and say, "Here am I, send me." Amen.